There was a bit of breaking news that happened over last week, like after I had recorded the podcast. I think it was like Friday. I'm pretty sure that this came out that there is a new PSA 10 all time leader, and it's the Victor Wembanyama Prism card. Now, on Hobby Hotline, I was the host with Chris Harris and Victor from True RCs this past weekend. I'm not going to talk about it necessarily as much on this show because if I'm going to be honest, I think we had a pretty good conversation. We really dove into some numbers, looking at some other cards that I think could compare to this one. I just wanted to make sure that if you're listening to this podcast, you're updated on that piece of news. So if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about it, go check out Hobby Hotline from this past weekend. Because that's where we talked about it a little bit more. Now, I do want to give Panini a little bit of credit here. I know, kind of surprising, kind of probably pretty surprising if you have listened to the show over the past few months with some criticism that I've had. I have actually, no, I have, well, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I have one good thing and then one piece of sort of criticism, I would say. The one good thing is that in Prism Draft Picks basketball, they are going to be combining college prospects, current professional superstars, legends, and with men and women in the same set. I don't think this isn't necessarily the first time that men and women players have been in the same set, but it is one of the first times we've seen in such a big set. And Panini over this past year with the college sets specifically, because the other innovation that they had recently was in the collegiate NFL national treasures, I believe. They had players who were playing. So I believe Quinn Ewers was in that set. And it was also all of the players that are in it normally when they do these college sets. So, you know, one thing I got on Panini a couple times for was just not really innovating at all. And so when they do innovate, and they do innovate in a way that I think is good for the industry, I want to make sure I'm calling that out. And I'm calling that out here because I do think that it is a cool idea that now they're going to start including pro and college players in the same set. I also think it's very cool that they're going to be including men and women basketball players in this set, which that makes sense. I mean, Bowman basketball, that's a product that has men and women in it also. So it's not innovative from the sense that like it's the first time we've ever seen that. I mean, there's also, there's Goodwin Champions that has men and women in it. There's Allen and Ginter. Sometimes they include women on that checklist. So I think it's very cool that they are innovating in this way and figuring out ways that they can spice up products really that, in my opinion, I feel like nobody really cares about. I have talked at lengths about why I think people don't really necessarily care about college products like the way that Panini does it specifically versus how Topps does it. But I think, if I had to guess, there is probably some sort of product strategy that Panini has had, and either they had like a 2 or 3 year window for the strategy where they said after a certain amount of years, like similar to how Topps has a strategy with how they are designing the flagship cards. Every 3 or 4 years, they end up completely changing the way the card is designed. And then over the next 3 or 4 years, they end up including sort of similar elements. So I don't know. Maybe that could be a reason why Panini hadn't really changed up anything. Now, obviously, Caitlin Clark is good. Probably one of the main reasons why they're going to be doing that because they now can include, you know, on the card here they have a Caitlin Clark RC. Well, yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it would be a rookie card, but it's just maybe the one piece of criticism I think of it is that they're coming out with a college product like at a completely different time. Maybe actually, I don't know exactly. I mean, maybe that's good because it's coming out in the middle of the basketball season. It's coming out at the end of the women's basketball season, which, you know, Prism WNBA is supposed to be coming out February 5th. That's what I've seen the date for. So, the women's basketball season actually is very interesting. And from that standpoint, where college and the pro happen at different times in the year. the pro season starts in the spring and ends at the end of the summer. And then the women's college season obviously is like October, November timeframe of when it starts. So, players like Caitlin Clark, and then some of the players even play in like the Olympics also. So some players have, which Caitlin Clark unfortunately didn't make the Olympic team, which a lot of people were pretty upset by. Um, I don't know. I would have put her on the team even. I don't really care if she's sitting on the bench and she's the 12th player. I mean, if you look at the men's pro team, you had Jason Tatum, who had just won the championship, who had sat on the bench and was the player who really didn't play. Whether I think whether people like it or not, Caitlin Clark is the biggest name in women's sports. And I know that from one side, I see that there is a competitive aspect to people not wanting to include her name in conversations for most important female athlete or best player in the WNBA. But at the same time, it's like, why? I don't understand. I'm just a little bit confused why they're not more like embracing her. Like, it's not, I don't know. It's, she seems very level headed, and maybe she seems a lot like kind of like Larry Bird. And I don't know if people really talked about Larry Bird maybe the same way, just from the sense that she can shoot threes and she talks a lot of crap, I'm pretty sure, like on the court. Which, we're not going to get into the offseason dynamics of the WNBA here, but either way. So that is, I think, a cool product that Panini is going to be coming out with. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily a criticism, but we did get some updated release dates on Panini products coming up in the next month or so. And there is a lot of basketball. We're finally going to be getting 2024-25 products. We still have, let's see, there is still Immaculate Basketball, which actually that's set for April, and then Flawless Basketball. So I don't know. Maybe that is maybe that's part of my criticism. It's like they need to just come out with these products already. Like, I don't know. It's something that I've talked at length about that annoys me. But we have Hoops, which is the first NBA licensed NBA product of the year that comes out with players in their new pro uniforms. Their pro uniform. Sorry, for some reason I couldn't speak there. Their pro uniforms. So that's going to be out January 24th. That's in a couple weeks. That's going to be a big product, I think. I mean, it's always Hoops, I feel like, is very similar to Series 1 because it's like the first product really of the new cycle and it gets everybody really excited. And then let's see, we got Revolution Basketball, which I believe that has the Kaboom in it, if I'm not mistaken, for basketball. Then we have Prism Basketball, which coming out pretty early on in the year here, which I'm kind of surprised by. 2024-2025 Prism. I mean, I guess it came out in February last year. I'm just thinking back to like the Zion year. Zion was like October of the same year that he was drafted. So like, I don't know. They had so much time here to really put out some of these products, and now it's February and we're still waiting on Prism Basketball. That's kind of neither here nor there. And then Prism Choice Basketball comes out at the end of the month. And those are kind of the big products for basketball in the next, relatively near future. For football, we have Donruss Football, 2024 Donruss Football, which that's going to come out also January 24th. January 24th was Hoops and Donruss. In my opinion, if they're going to be coming out with products on the same day, I don't know. I kind of would like to see them do a little bit of dual marketing around those products. I think that would be kind of cool for them to do because both of those products feel very similar, where it's like the first product of the new year, 2024 Donruss Football. I thought we already had Donruss Football. Maybe you're going to I guess maybe not. Apparently we had not. And then you've got 2024 Photogenic Football, which is basically like Stadium Club. Then Rookies and Stars, clearly Donruss. Not a huge fan of clearly Donruss, if I'm going to be completely honest. Wait, so they're coming out with Donruss Football after Prism? I don't know. It seems kind of weird. But then for soccer, we have a couple big products too. Donruss Soccer, 2024-25, and then 2023-24 Immaculate Soccer. If I remember correctly, Donruss Soccer, that's going to be like a combo of a national team and pro team product. So, those are the big products we have coming up for January and the beginning of February. Do I wish that they would market these a little bit differently? Sure, but I guess with all of the licenses that Panini still has, I mean, not for a while, for soon enough, they won't, unfortunately. But for all the products that they do have, it's probably tough to come up with a full marketing campaign for one of these products when it's like you have to come out with, like, they have so many. I don't want to call them tier. I don't know how I would tier them, but like beginner, I feel like it's beginner level products. Panini, for example, they have so many of those. Like I would say Don Russ is in there. Um, Hoops is in there also. I mean, Optic in a way, I think is kind of in there also. But they have so many of those products. I'm sure it's probably tough to market them in a way that makes people excited. But also then they have to look forward pretty quickly and be like, all right, now we've got the next product coming out and the next product. And I don't think there'll ever be any consolidation of products, but I think if they were to, I don't know, the consolidation of products really is how I would see them really making a dent in, I think, the market for some of these other sports. And I don't know if that's what they're going to have to do with. Obviously, that's what they're going to have to do with basketball and football once they lose the licenses. Because I mean, what are they going to do? Come out with all of these products with one license? Like, I mean, they do that sort of for baseball, but I think realistically, the baseball release schedule is what we are going to see from Panini once they lose the football and basketball licenses. We have a pretty big update here from PSA. I'll just kind of read some of it. So, both to close out 2024 and to begin 2025, we are experiencing high volume of incoming submissions, which has resulted in the delay of our receiving process, the unboxing and system entry of delivered packages. They mentioned that this is pretty much affecting bulk and value the most, which, like, obviously, because those are your highest, those are going to be the most ones that customers are using, especially in this, like, the fact that they've made it so easy. And then also, so there's two parts of this that I think are interesting. That part, which I'll talk about. And then also, Nat Turner put out a tweet earlier, no, yesterday or 2 days ago, that the PSA Vault in the past week has received the highest number of cards in a single week since they launched the platform. Uh, are those two things correlated? Yeah, probably. I mean, PSA launching their own vault like that was one of the bigger changes, I think, in their platform in quite some years, other than getting more people grading. Because that's what they said they're going to do. Is they said that they're going to get more people. They're going to get more graders to do some of these smaller submissions. And if you go into the comments of that tweet, it's like a lot of people are complaining about like October, mid-December, it's saying, which, I mean, realistically, it's probably an October time frame. Also, it's like I saw some people talking about the GameStop edition here, which, if we looked back like a month or two, probably there was, I think it was Neon Sports Cards or Sports and Cards, put out a video that I talked about with the PSA GameStop partnership, kind of just estimating how many cards they had gotten from the start of that, which that started in around October. And I think, I don't know, I think PSA has done a fine job since they really ramped things back up to get cards graded in a timely manner. I mean, you just look at, for example, like I talked about yesterday, the Wembenyana Prism, like there was 40,000 of those cards graded in a year. Like, and with Wembenyana, he had 6 of the top 10. So it's like when there are these crazy prospects, I think business within sports cards is very good, but I think it's important to recognize that sports cards, the business of it, not necessarily the boxes, or I guess, or the companies, the secondary business, like the second layer, the customers, the people buying and selling, the people grading, the people doing box breaks. It's all dependent on the rookie class. Like, we had 2 rookie classes in a row that were extremely strong. We had last year's football class, which was strong, then the basketball class, and then you have Caitlin Clark, and then you have Connor Bedard, and then you have, you know, Ellie De La Cruz and Paul Skeens and Jackson Holiday. And now with Prism football out, you have this new rookie class with people sending in cards from that Prism product. So what my point here is that if you are in business for the secondary level, not the Tops or Fanatics or Panini side of the business, the if you own a business and you or if you do it within sports cards, you definitely need to prepare for times of your business career potentially where the players just aren't as good. Like, I think if you look back at, for example, maybe, I don't know, 2019, 2020, 2021, the basketball season that had or maybe it's this upcoming basketball season potentially, for the rookies are not super exciting. And the only really exciting rookie, unfortunately, is out for the rest of the season. Or if you look at, at the time, the Jalen Green, Pablo Benchero rookie class didn't look very good. Now, Paulo has become a pretty good superstar in the league right now. So there is that aspect of it. But I think being prepared for there to be a downtick is really, I think, what most people need to potentially be prepared for with rookie classes that are not going to be as good as this last one and then kind of half of this one. Because, basketball, football, they take place in kind of a similar time frame. And obviously, we're still getting products from last year, unfortunately. So, that could be a thing where maybe Tops, that's what Tops is doing. Maybe they're looking at it and saying, this rookie class is not very good. Like, I'd be surprised if they came out with this many products for basketball, like over the next year or so that don't include Victor Wembanyama. Like, I wouldn't, if you were to say they don't come out with if you were to say they don't come out, Tops doesn't come out with another basketball product until they get the license, like that would make sense. Like, I don't know. The rookie class just isn't very good. Now you got Bronny, but I think unfortunately, Bronny is going to be a player that people want. And I say unfortunately because it's does he even ever play in the NBA? I don't really know. Is that going to drive up prices for some of his cards or some products? Yeah, potentially, I think, because people want the hot new rookie, which I think is still going to probably be Jared McCain, who was the rookie for the 76ers who got hurt. I still think that people are going to want him. And I think the 76ers are still probably going to be a hot team. But overall, you have a really good football rookie class. Even last year, you had a good football rookie class. And I think, too, PSA, they probably got a little bit of an influx in cards because there weren't as many autos for some of these big stars. In my opinion, PSA is more or less the company that you want to go with if you're getting base cards graded. I think SGC is in that conversation also. But Beckett, you just don't, a Beckett 9.5, you just don't really see, in my opinion. I don't know. I mean, and it's not even really necessarily my opinion. I was looking at, for example, the BGS 9.5 of the Wembanyama, and the numbers of how much or how many of those 9.5s versus PSA 10s there are, it's astronomically different, really. It's pretty wild. And for a time within the sports card industry, the BGS 9.5 and the PSA 10 were very similarly priced, and they had a very similar pop report. Now that's just not the case. I mean, the interesting thing here is that an SGC 10 is, I would say, probably around the same price as those PSA 10s. Now, it also depends on which grades got the 10. If I don't know. I mean, it probably depends on which of the subgrades got the 10s and how many 10s you got there. Because obviously, I think you still get a 10, even if there's two 10s, I believe, and two 9.5s, you still get a 10. Obviously, if you get the three 10s, that's going to be a 10. And then if you get the four 10s on the card, that's going to be a black label. So that's a whole different conversation, I think, for that the differences in the 10s and the differences in the 9.5s. I think that's also an interesting nuance that some people might not realize that are new to sports cards. But overall, we have potentially some delays here with PSA again. And I would say it looks very similar potentially to what happened in like the Zion Jaw and then also the LaMelo Ball year, where PSA had to shut down right before Prism came out because they knew that LaMelo Ball was going to be like an insanely highly graded card, which now looking back at that draft, it's Anthony Edwards that probably should have been the player who was graded a little bit more. And yeah, I think on one hand it seems fairly obvious that this something like this could happen again. Also, like PSA was running so many different types of specials to get cards graded. It's like now in retrospect, it's like, did they even need to do that? Like, did they even need to run any type of these grading specials, knowing now that there's like there's huge delays on some of these cards? I hope that they look at this and I hope that they look at this and just and on one hand, I just wish that they would charge what they charge for the specials. Like that's one thing that I've thought of for quite some time, just in general when it comes to products. It's like if they can charge you a certain amount, why do they not just charge you that amount? Like if it's less than what it actually should cost. That never in my head, it's like obviously because they want to make more money, but it's like it just seems like they're just making more money to make more money. Like it doesn't seem like they're really adding too much infrastructure. Like PSA obviously has done a crazy increase in like graders and all that type of stuff, but it's like you look on the flip side of that, there still are these delays. So hopefully they can get that figured out. And maybe it's not going to take a year, or maybe it's not going to take a couple months. Maybe it's just like a month of them delaying bulk and value submissions. But at least for now, if you want to get any of those cards graded, unfortunately, you are going to have to wait. The wild card round in the NFL is now officially over. And I was trying to do the math in my head, and I'm not 100%. I mean, I guess I do like that the NFL has spread out the games, and adding the two more games, one for each conference, does end up adding another slate. Like they can do two Saturday, three Sunday, one Monday. I guess that makes sense. I kind of do miss the days of just like two games. You know, you got the Saturday game, two Saturday games, two Sunday games going into now we're in the divisional round. And the thing I'm going to talk about on today's episode is check out my cards put out their last like week's worth of top 5 best-selling players, and the number 1 player on there is Joe Burrow, who is not playing in the playoffs. Burrow, he feels like a player who like I I feel like he has some sort of not like a curse. I don't know what it is, but it feels like it feels like the Bengals will never make the Super Bowl again. I was about to say World Series, but they're going to make the Super Bowl again. I mean, playing in that first Super Bowl against the Rams, it felt pretty close. That was a weird Super Bowl because I believe that was the same year. Actually, no, that wasn't the same year. But either way, so Burrow makes that one Super Bowl. Number 2, Gibbs. Number 3, Jackson. Number 4, number 3, Lamar Jackson. Number 4, Josh Allen. Number 5, Patrick Mahomes, which I guess Mahomes will probably always be on this list just based on how many cards he has. And I would be interested to know of this list, their rookie specific cards, because Mahomes and Josh Allen to an extent, actually Burrow, Jackson, Allen, Mahomes, they're more than likely on a lot of products like insert checklists. So like they're just going to have more cards. So that's another reason why I think some of these lists that get put out, you know, in theory could be not skewed, but like there are just more cards of those players, very similar to a Victor Wembanyama. So like he's just in way more sets. Like he's in more insert sets. He's going to have more, well, not more autographs, but he's going to be in more insert sets. He obviously is going to be in multiple different base products where he might have like a dual card or he might have multiple cards on the base checklist because of how popular he is, which I think is similar to Mahomes and maybe most of these quarterbacks for the most part. But I think what this says to me is that people are trying to load up on Burrow in a season where he didn't make the playoffs because I think if the Bengals can get if they can bring back T Higgins and they still have Jamar Chase, and they can I guess they did have Chase Brown. He played pretty well, kind of got hurt towards the end of the season there, which was like that crazy game against Denver. If they had just won that game, they had a they at least had a shot to make the playoffs there. And like I said, what it says to me is that people are loading up for yeah, as the playoffs are going on. They're going to load up on Burrow. And just looking at the schedule, the the 8 teams that are left are the Texans, Chiefs, uh Commanders, Lions, Rams, Eagles, Ravens, Bills. All fairly good quarterback matchups if you really look at it. Like I think that these games this week are probably they're going to be very good. Like there's no team that feels like they just randomly won a playoff game. Like all these teams feel like they're, you know, on the cusp of like could potentially easily make the Super Bowl. Like, if you were to say any of these 8 teams were playing each other in the Super Bowl of any of the matchups, it wouldn't be super surprising to me. I mean, maybe the Commanders are probably if you're ranking 1 to 8, they're probably 8, and then maybe actually the Texans too. So like the 2 teams that are playing the top seeds, those ones are probably the lowest. Like if you were to say it's Texans Commanders, I would probably be pretty surprised. But from a quarterback perspective, I just don't know if buying any of their cards in the playoffs right now is going to be a good idea. I think you're looking at, for example, even if you're looking at those 2 teams I just talked about that are the lowest teams, they have 2 of the hottest quarterbacks, I think, in all of the hobby with the CJ Stroud or Stroud. I always forget how to pronounce his last name. And Jaden Daniels, 2 of the newer quarterbacks that have rookies. But like, Mahomes, I think I just don't see how Mahomes cards can go up or down because at this point in his career, he's won MVPs, he's won the Super Bowls. Like, sure, he could win another Super Bowl, but it's like, how, is that even going to drive up the price of his cards? Like, I feel like if I'm going to be honest, I feel like Mahomes is in an era where people are like not rooting for him anymore. Like early on in his career, it felt like he had a lot more support from the league and support. Well, other than, I don't know, people say that the refs, but I mean, that's what people said about New England when they were winning all those Super Bowls. And maybe he's doing something similar that Tom Brady did. But I also want people to remember this. Like, if you take Mahomes and Brady's careers, they're very similar, where at the beginning of their career, they won a bunch of Super Bowls. Brady had a 10-year span where he didn't win any Super Bowls. So, like, if you were to tell me last year Mahomes doesn't win a Super Bowl until 2034 or 20, like, which is crazy to say, but like, or 2032 or 2033, like, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you go through these cycles where your teams have to revamp and retool based on contracts because you have a bunch of rookies that get better and then they want higher contracts and then you can't sign half of them. So I think Mahomes, I don't know, he could go through a stretch potentially where they don't win any Super Bowls, but I don't see how. I'm not 100% sure if that would affect his cards. Like, I don't think I don't think Mahomes, because if we're comparing Mahomes' collectability to a player like Mike Trout, for example, I don't think they go in the same trajectory where Trout for a decade was really considered the best player in all of baseball. And the past like 4 or 5 years has really fallen off a cliff, if I'm going to be honest. And I don't know where like what that is, like, or how that happens, but like even Trout's cards have really kind of seen that dip as well. I just don't know how or if Mahomes' cards would do that also. Then you also have, I mean, the matchup of the 2018 rookie quarterbacks between Lamar and Josh Allen. That's going to be a great matchup. Jalen Hurts, he could be an example of a player that, and I know I talked about at the beginning, so I don't see any quarterbacks. I think Hurts is probably the only quarterback that's playing right now that could see a jump in his card prices realistically, because I don't know. I think the Eagles have a very interesting like narrative around them that like they're not good, but they like are good. And again, Saquon, I don't know. I don't know if he'll ever do what he did again. Like, I don't know if he'll ever rush for 2,000 yards again. I mean, if he does, I think he really has the opportunity to, and like I said, I wrote this in an article for SI. I think he has one of the only opportunities, and I thought CeeDee Lamb kind of had this opportunity also to do this, but like not as much. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, the opportunity to really change the landscape of like cards, because I don't know. I just don't see how people could justify spending money on a Mahomes card unless you're really like, it just feels like the Mahomes card only has downside, where if you're trying to buy a Barkley card, you're looking at a lot of upside there. Because if you're looking at where that card can go compared to where the price is now, like 2018 especially is such an important year in sports cards. Like 2018, the Prism rookie class is like insane. So, I don't know, maybe it's not even necessarily buying the individual cards. Like, I think the 2018 Prism football could be one of the best products of all time. And I think it would be very smart to, I don't know, look, if you're looking to invest in product, like that might be a product to look into to figure out like what's the best case scenario there to buy that type of card or those types of cards, because 2018 Prism with that class is just like an insane, like Baker Mayfield is another example of a player from that draft class. Sam Darnold, who I don't know, he might have hurt his contract stock a little bit in these past 2 games, unfortunately. And again, that may show. I don't know if it's going to be I don't know if it's recency bias in the sports card market, but in football, it's definitely going to be recency bias. Like, sure, they went 14-2, but then they end up the season 14-4 because he lost the last 2 games of the season in prime time. That's not going to be great. And, shame on the NFL for putting him in prime time, if I'm going to be completely honest, because that just is like, that seemed like a random Monday night primetime game. Like, it wasn't like those were like the number 2 versus 7. I mean, maybe you say those were the 2 most competitive teams potentially, but like obviously that game wasn't. And Sam Darnold showed why maybe he isn't that big time quarterback. And especially with the Vikings, like they've got JJ McCarthy coming back. So I think overall with these matchups, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's the right time to buy before a potential Super Bowl run. Like, I think the Burrow buy is potentially a better purchase than anyone you could buy that's in the playoffs right now. Because I think I think it's just misdirection. That's where I really see it. I just think if some people are going left, you go right, vice versa. Like, if people are buying quarterback cards of players in the playoffs right now, it might be worth looking into players who, like Burrow, for example, almost made it. Like, it's not like the Bengals were horrible and weren't even close. Like, they almost made the playoffs. So the move right now, if you are looking to purchase football cards, which I would wait till after the Super Bowl, realistically, but the thing I would do now if you are looking to buy football cards is probably look for players that are not playing in the playoffs. So we've got two, 1.5 main topics on today's podcast. The first one is shorter, and I don't know. It's not going to be too long. I don't think it will be, at least. I don't know. We know how sometimes when I say that, I rant for a little bit, but there was something that I found interesting that I saw on Twitter the past couple days. It was somebody posted, so McGonagall 00. I guess they were Casey Magana. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I just whatever. MCDONOUGH 00. They posted that they were looking for Jackson Morrell autographs, and there are 8 different variations of his autographs. And I guess throughout your career, that would be fine. But Morrell was a rookie last year. And I wonder if that will, in the long run, hurt or help his potential card values. I mean, obviously, I think the ultimate number 1 through 10 is if they end up being a good player. That ends up being the determining factor of whether their card values sustain or not. But the fact that it doesn't make sense why he would switch his autograph so many times. I mean, some of them are fairly similar. They have like some of them are like shorthand, some of them are full, his name full out. And so like the shorthand ones are a little bit like one or two letters. Those ones look a little bit more similar. But the ones where he wrote out his full name, you gotta imagine he probably just signed those ones first, and then halfway through he was like, wait, like there are other, I can just sign this not this way, like I don't have to hurt my hand, like, and I can still get paid, like I'm definitely going to do that. And there was like that photoshopped image of the Anthony Richardson autograph that was going around, that was like he literally just signed like the tiniest little AR in the corner of the sticker, which that was photoshopped. I was tricked for, until I zoomed in and I saw that like where it should have been in the middle, there was still a little bit of blue. You could see the person who photoshopped it, but the image was floating around. So I I think maybe the athletes might just need to get paid a little bit more for these autographs, or they just need to figure out a way to get less of them, or I don't know exactly what it is, because we've seen like Bowman athletes. Like people have posted stacks and stacks and stacks of thousands of cards that they have to sign. And so unfortunately, I've said this, we are in a era of sports cards where it's like the autograph is really one of the more important parts of products. And I don't know if Topps has necessarily pigeonholed themselves because they've made the autograph so important that it's like if you don't have autographs in the product, like that's going to be an issue. I don't really know how you fix that, because they have switched it where the Series 1 boxes used to be you were guaranteed an autograph. Now you're guaranteed an autograph or a relic, which is that's insane. Like if you are buying a hobby box of sports cards, there should be an autograph in there. And that's just based on like the standard I think that has been set by Topps, and not even Panini, because I'm not even going to get into their whole system where it's like on average, like it's the biggest, it's annoying, and I hate that. I hate that they do that. But the autographs have now become such important parts of the boxes that it's like I don't know. I don't know what you have to do here to get the player to sign the autographs the same. I don't know. It really is annoying, but it's also like they're millionaires, so it's like well, actually maybe not even necessarily like him, but they are going to be getting millions of dollars if they end up panning out. And the autographs, especially rookie autographs, I feel like Topps needs to do a little bit more to see that these autographs are all the same. Like Topps, either they need to say, hey, you need to stick with the same autograph, rookie autograph for sure. But if you want to change it after the year, they all have to be the same within the year, realistically. I don't know. You can't really send the cards back and be like, hey, re-sign them. But I don't know. Maybe that is something that they should be looking into. The other piece that we're going to be talking about today is going to be something that Chris Hoge from House of Jordan's Card Ladder, he put out a very interesting post about the first CJ Stroud card that sold. That was when it was Pop 1. It sold back in January of 2024 for $650, which I'm going to be completely honest here. I don't think for a Pop 1 first sale of a PSA 10, not horrible. Like, not, I think, as high as like, we saw like the $3,000 Don Russ Mac Jones, which now that is like literally, I think that's probably the worst sports card purchase of all time. I think maybe the person that sold the 1/1 Mac Jones Prism, that for like $100K, that one also. Basically, any Mac Jones card, I think, could probably be in the category of like worst sports card purchases, because his cards were pretty expensive, because he was supposed to be like that next guy after Brady. Like, sure, they had Cam Newton, but it was like they obviously were always going to move towards Mac Jones, and he was supposed to be the guy. But so $650 for the first Prism PSA 10 of the CJ Stroud. Now, a year later, January 12th of 2025. So this, like I said, this is from a couple days ago, with a Pop 7,629. That card is selling for $45. Obviously that price is going to go down. Do I think that the $45 will go up? I mean, at $45, you really can't find a better I think it's hard. I think it would be hard to find a better card and player combination than a Prism and a CJ Stroud for that price. That obviously that pop report is going to continue to go up. So it really comes down to, I think, a risk evaluation, where does the pop report, how does that affect the price of a card? Because another thing that I've been thinking about recently that I talked about on Hobby Hotline over the weekend was the difference between the PSA 10 Victor Wembanyama and the PSA 10 Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookie. Obviously, there's a much different pop report and much different gem percentage. Like gem percentage of that compared is like I think it's 60% for the Prism Wembanyama and it's like 4% for the Ken Griffey Jr. So, like this card, for example, I do wonder when the pop report or the population ends up like evening out. And if that's what ends up happening to the price of the card, because like I said, $45 does seem very low. Now, the what I feel like could be in the 10 to 15K range of PSA 10s at one point, that is a question that I will continue to kind of look for and see what we're looking at with this new market. It is a probably very liquid card. Like it's probably a card that you could buy and sell within a day if you really are trying to. Like if you could buy it for 20, you could easily sell it for 40 within that same day, hypothetically. Like if you're at a show, I'm sure that you could probably, if you were able to get some sort of deal on that card, you probably could flip it for 10, $15. But like that's really, if you're flipping it, that's all the profit that you're going to get at a $45 purchase. You know, I think nowadays we are in the era where people know the price of cards. Like I think that is one thing that is definitely very good within the industry. People are they're a lot smarter when it comes to knowing the price of cards or how to find the price of cards because back in the day you'd have to go to I don't know, Beckett Magazine to look up the price for a card. And it's like, who knows, like if you're comping a card the day before Beckett Magazine and you comp it too low or too high, like, there's an opportunity there for somebody to maybe do that. Or even before eBay potentially, like there was no way to comp cards. So like $45 for that card, although it does seem low, I wonder because this was one thing that when I was first getting into sports cards, I really was doing a lot of data analysis and I was doing a lot of like comparing like PSA 10 prices to other PSA 10 prices and looking at like population reports and like trying to come up with essentially like a almost like a algorithm in a way to like find undervalued cards potentially and like it still I think is an interesting exercise. I do think unfortunately now we're looking at so many cards being graded so quickly now that like pop reports can change within the thousands in a month. Like if CJ Stroud goes on to win the Super Bowl or he goes on to beat the Chiefs even like and he goes on to the AFC Championship game, like I could easily see 2,000 of those populations be or 2,000 PSA 10s be added to that population report in the next month or two just because that's what ends up happening within sports cards. People are very reactionary and I think we've become less reactionary, but I do think that like a player like that going on a run like this would affect his cards. So I do think it's an interesting opportunity to buy a card like that, but do I think there are better opportunities? I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's you're getting that level player for $45 seems like a pretty good deal, but then you take into account the population report and then maybe it's not as good of a deal. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does this weekend, if he does anything, and where that price could go. Because if he has any type of run or if he plays well, like that could be a card to potentially buy this offseason. If you think that next season he will just continue to get better and better, maybe similar to like Bryce Young or any of the other young rookie quarterbacks over these past couple years. So to wrap up this week, we have two-ish stories about PSA, and then one just kind of breaking down some stuff that Sports Card Investor put out from the Market Movers app earlier yesterday. So the first thing for PSA is that they're going to have the population data available within eBay. Collect Media, Darren Ravel's company, put out this information about PSA. You're going to be able to see the different population reports all within the eBay app. I think that is a phenomenal decision here. I think this has been my hope for sports cards really since I started making content and stuff. It was to make getting information easier for collectors because I think it makes the market healthier if people have all the information of what they're buying. And I won't harp exactly on like when I was first getting back into sports cards back in my day, which actually at this point it's getting pretty crazy to be honest, because 2018, so it's like I don't know 6 or 7 years ago at this point, which is pretty wild to think that 2018 was that long ago. But either way, um, one thing that I noticed within sports cards was that it just was like there just wasn't a lot of information. There wasn't a lot of stuff that was out there, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to start making content was that like I wanted to be, I figured there was an avenue, there was a space in the market for people to put out information. And I felt like I, could make content and do content. And that's, been my thought process all throughout this kind of or thought process all throughout this journey that I've been on. So the fact that now buyers are able to see a lot of different types of information. They're able to get comps all in one place with Card Ladder. They're able to see how many PSA 8s or PSA 9s or PSA 10s there are of any card directly when they're buying through eBay. They're able to do all of these things. They're able to get cards graded and then sell them directly with PSA and not have to worry about getting them shipped to you. You can buy and sell without having to get the cards. The easier it is to get information and the easier it is for buyers and sellers to do the buying and selling, I think it makes the card market healthier. It leaves less of a gap for people who maybe were trying to buy and sell cards that are I don't know, a little bit more rare or a little bit, I mean, maybe not even rare. They just people that were buying and selling based on information that they had that other people didn't have. I just think that the market doesn't have as many of I think that that first of all, that's bad. You shouldn't be doing that realistically. But I think we're seeing a lot less of it now in the industry because of things like this, where PSA is going to be putting all of their information with eBay. So that's really great. The other thing that PSA did is that they're raising their prices. They raised them like $1 for the lower levels, and then I think it was $50 for like the 200 the $250 level up to $300. I think it was 240 basically 250 up to 300. I think if they're going to be doing these things, and I think if PSA is going to be one of the places that you can get this information where you can buy and sell, you can do all of these things. Raising prices is kind of inevitable. And I mean, there also were those delays. And that is an issue when you like literally they can't PSA can't grade cards fast enough for the industry. And I think on one hand, yes, raising pricing is not the best. I think that PSA, well, it's not the best, but PSA is doing other things. Like they're not just raising prices and not like changing anything. Like I said, they're doing the thing with eBay. They're working on their vault system. They're working on a bunch of different things. So like raising the prices, I'm fine with because they're making the product a little bit better. Um, I do worry that if we have a draft class that isn't as stacked as the one we had in 2024, that the raising of prices may not really matter in the long run. I think like if they from a company standpoint, obviously if you can raise prices, that will hopefully mean that you're just going to grade less cards at a more expensive at a more expensive price. But if we get to a point like in a year or two and the draft classes just aren't as good and they're not grading as many cards, like maybe the raising of the prices will seem not like a great idea. But also, I don't know. I'm not necessarily sitting here complaining because it's only like $1 or two. Now, sure, I do wish that there was a little bit more transparency around like the like the pricing of when you get a card graded and how much they charge extra for that. They have put out guidelines of that, but I just wish there was a little bit more information. So they're raising those prices, and I don't know. They are on one hand, I don't like that they're doing it because I think that customers should be able to get the thing that they want at a price that they've already been paying for years. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, PSA is, innovating in the market and trying to really sustain at least a little bit of research and development here when it comes to new things that they're trying. Um, oh, and that's it for PSA for right now. There is another interesting piece of information that I thought was good. So, WWE and TNA. TNA is like it was before AEW, it was like the number two promotion in the United States. So TNA has done partnerships with NXT. So you're gonna see people in TNA. So you like, the Hardy brothers, Samoa Joe, and these may be names that no one that's listening to the podcast knows if you're not a wrestling fan. But those are names that are in that are in at TNA that are going to potentially be in WWE. And with the Royal Rumble coming up, that just means that there's going to be like crazy returns, I think, on like random superstars that are going to be in the Rumble. This I think is a big deal for the development of younger talent in WWE. If you can have I think NXT works really well if you are a wrestling fan, but it just doesn't get the eyeballs, I think, compared to like AEW or TNA. So I think that's big. So we'll see if there's going to be any. That means there probably will be potentially some TNA products specifically. There won't be any of those TNA wrestlers in the upcoming Topps Chrome product for WWE, obviously, but I think that is a big deal. Now, the last piece that we're going to talk about for this week is going to be Sports Card Investor put out some information through the Market Movers app. The top 5 football cards that have sold in the past 7 days. And I was a little bit surprised that some of the cards that were on here. So we had number 5. It was the 2024. These are all 2024, and they're all rookies. Was Bo Nix Prism, and then 4 was Jaden Daniels Mosaic NFL debut. Number 3, Jaden Daniels Prism. Number 2 was a Bo Nix Donruss, and then the number 1 was the Jaden Daniels Donruss. And I guess maybe there's just more Donruss that's currently available on the secondary market compared to Prism, because your Prism came out in December, which still those 2 top quarterbacks are in, they're in there for like the top cards. Like it's basically Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix are kind of dominating that list. I'm just surprised that it's not just all dominated by Prism. Like Donruss, I feel like Panini should be trying to brand as their like flagship product realistically. I think it's probably on the same level in terms of like you're paying for what you're getting as top Series 1 and Series 2. Like if you're buying Donruss, you kind of know what you're getting. Like you know that you're getting some base cards, you're getting some cheaper base cards. There's a chance that you're getting and with Donruss, there's a chance that you're getting, I believe the downtowns are in Donruss, which they had like the dual downtowns now. And so maybe that's just why there's more of that potentially. And there was like a Costco mega pack with like a bunch of different packs that came in the product. So like maybe people were searching for that, and that's just why there's so many more of those cards. I'm just surprised that it's not like Jane Daniels Prism, Caleb Williams Prism. Like it's Caleb Williams, or excuse me, it's Jane Daniels and Bo Nix, but it's their Prism and Donruss. I'm just surprised that the list isn't all Prism. Again, or maybe Prism is the flagship brand. I don't know. I just think that overall Panini needs to look at what they could brand as their flagship product and like figure out a way to do that. Like I guess it's tough because at this point there hasn't been like there isn't a product I think that they would consider their flagship product. So it's like if you just slap the branding flagship product on like any random set, like you're running the risk that collectors are just going to roll their eyes and be like, no, we're the ones that decide which set is which set is the most important, which I do agree with. And maybe that is like the big difference between Topps and Panini is Topps has a flagship set with 3 different leases, and then their flagship set also goes to the Topps Chrome set, which like that's sort of what Optic and Donruss is. Like Donruss is like the flagship, and then Optic is kind of like their top Chrome set. So it's like it feels like organically, if Panini were to take Donruss and try and make that their flagship set, I think collectors would be okay with it, and I think it would make sense. I would probably get rid of Clearly Donruss. I don't really like that product if I'm going to be completely honest. Like I think that they and this is something I've mentioned maybe on the podcast potentially. I think instead of doing a Clearly Donruss, I think that they should have done a paper Prism card. And maybe Prism implies that it's like a shiny card, so maybe doing a paper Prism wouldn't really work. But I just think that like that brand going Donruss and Optic really, I think, is the correct way to go. And to add that Clearly Donruss in there, I just don't think it is adding value to the market the way that I think like a paper Prism product were to. So, that was the list of those top quarterbacks. It's not super surprising. Like the top two quarterbacks are the ones that were the rookies that were playing in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see over the course of the rest of the year what cards end up being on that top 10 football list. But also, there were only rookie cards on that top 5 list. There were no other players, which I think at this point there's just is so much of the 2024 product that it makes sense that it's going to be the highest on the list. But like again, I was a little bit surprised that there was no other variety. It was really only rookies from the 2024 class.